don't think the night sights are quite on. Smoked the target there. That's a good shot. I mean, I was aiming for that. Yeah, the night sights are...
All right, everyone, and welcome back to a new season of FUD Blasters. Now, we've done enough of these to be able to read your comments and see some patterns, right?
Pattern of cope is how I would describe it.
Yeah, so I think it's important that we cover a couple things that we are doing and that we aren't doing, right? So, number one, we're not here to validate your purchase. Like that.
Specifically, we're here to give our opinion of sort of objective things that we notice about guns. And of course, some objective classifications we may make may seem subjective to you and may in the end, in the grand scheme of things, right, especially as standalone items, may actually be subjective. But we're trying to keep things specific to, like, we're both gun nuts with the particular flavor of interested in guns designs and why things are the way they are and how they work, more so than out the other end. We feel that there's a lot of content already sort of provided as far as how does this gun if I go and shoot a little drill?
Right.
Or how does this gun do if SIG pays me to say nice things about it?
Right.
Did great. Isn't that strange?
Yeah, or like, how cool does it look? Which, don't get me wrong, that's a very important factor in a firearm. We all know that we only own and carry guns to look cool. But so specifically, my background is firearms attorney, and also because I've been around these guys long enough, I've engaged in some gun design myself. And Ivan has engaged in a lot of gun design. We've both designed guns from the ground up, which some of the commenters didn't seem to know, as we got a lot of, why don't you go and design it?
Like, that's a good idea.
Yeah, okay, I'll do another one.
I should try that.
Yeah. But because, and especially me, I have kind of an IP background, I have sat and spent so much time reading gun patents going back hundreds of years. You see a lot of patterns, and then you see like some of the same mistakes being made again, and you go, why the hell are you doing that? And that's kind of what I'm bringing to the table. And Ivan, what is your, what are you bringing to the table?
I sort of just enjoy the, be it from a manufacturing or a pure design standpoint, you can see, there's a lot to be learned about a gun. And maybe to you, the shooter, right, it's useless. It's something known as like in computer science, they call it encapsulation, where the end user doesn't have to, like in good software, the end user doesn't have to know how software works. They just know how to push button and then it does good thing. Now, guns are today more than ever that way, where you don't even really have to know how a gun works to have a gun that works well, right? In fact, you can go thousands of rounds without cleaning them and it all works great and it's super cool. And when it comes time to clean them, you don't have to know jack about a gun. It's like there's 2 pins to push out and then you can clean it.
Right.
Where that sort of thing is interesting, but I sort of like seeing how different designers incorporate that. And I guess it really comes down to 2 things that we touched on in the previous videos, but we didn't really elaborate on. And it comes down to encapsulation and affordance. Affordance being a concept that I'm also importing from computer science, where things on a gun that look like they do something actually do it. So like the bit sort of there in front of where the grip is, it better be the trigger, because if it isn't, that's really weird, right? Yeah. Like we're used to that being where the trigger is. And this isn't, I'm not trying to say like everything has to have AR-15 controls or whatever, but like if something looks like a button to adjust a thing, like it's on what looks like an adjustable piece or what is normally an adjustable piece, and you have a button there and it doesn't adjust it, that's kind of weird.
And what he's kind of calling out there was on the the VHS, we were looking at that gun and there was a piece on the cheek, which all of the reviews called a adjustable cheek riser.
And we even found, so it was like a paid advertisement, right? Springfield gave the gun to a gun reviewer, and the gun reviewer, who probably would have had Springfield review this, like Springfield gave him a gun and an expensive scope on the gun, and he said multiple times, he referred to it as the adjustable cheek comb riser, blah blah, whatever. And
so we were messing with this thing, and it turns out it isn't that. It's
a retainer for a crazy design for a pin that holds shut the side of the ejection port that the gun selection is not, or ejection selection is not set to, which is, it's like a way, it is one of the ways that they possibly could have accomplished.
Is that just so that the spring, it can come back a 1/4 inch? I don't understand. Well, because it still shoves forward.
It goes exactly back into the same spot.
There's got to be a way to lock it, but like, good God.
I don't see it. In fact, I only see one spot on the frame where it can dingus in. See? It dinguses in.
Maybe that's just how it disassembles then. It's just there for disassembly.
But all that to say, people viewed this as a point of failure on our part, saying, you guys are so stupid, you didn't even know that this bizarre use case, right, was being employed here. But no, that's a point of failure on the gun, especially with that two people with our level of expertise could go to it and really believe it was that thing.
And we're like chimps that have finally figured out rocked. It's like, whoa,
right.
What's this do?
Yeah, we're trying to show that type of failure, right? A poorly designed gun will have you sitting there pulling on something, right? So that's what we're doing here. And we do incorporate shooting, one, because it's fun to do. We like to shoot guns, but also there's a lot that you can only really experience from shooting the gun.
Right.
And so that's what we're not going for here's the mechanical accuracy and everything that you can conceivably expect out of the gun.
This is how many, like a million round count, torture test, ultra giga, we're going to drop them, stomp on them, crush them, break them. Like that is obviously a very, very important big part of gun design.
Right.
But we're not speaking to the endurance aspect or the mechanical, functional, reliability, accuracy standpoint so much. Like, obviously, if the gun's got accuracy, mechanical issues that show up early,
we'll point them out.
Right. And then this goes to something we had said before last time, where for a gun to prove that it's bad, it's not hard.
Yeah.
A bad gun will let you know pretty quick that it's not good. A good gun proving that it's good all the way through and through is something that it's almost like a no true Scotsman thing, right? Because eventually every gun will fail. They're mechanical things that are prone to doing so eventually.
Right. And so when we do the shooting and show you the targets and stuff like that, we're not showing you what mechanically the gun's capable of. We're not showing you what it's capable of in the hands of an expert shooter, because we're just really having a go. We're kind of trying to show you, and I like the way you put it, the mouthfeel of it.
Right. Like you can learn a lot about, like, this gun sucks to shoot, like it's not comfortable, or like why would somebody think that this is a correct ergonomic choice?
Right.
And you can learn that quickly by shooting a gun, where something that like how long does an AR-15's safety selector, how many times can you click it before the intent nub is worn down? Because it's a number, right? But that's not necessarily what we're talking to from a design standpoint.
Right. So yeah, with all that out of the way, this channel, our system of reviews is supposed to be the relatively, and we're biased.
Everyone is.
And I'm going to tell you when I'm being biased to the best of my ability, but unmotivated, opinions of two gun enthusiasts who I like to think we know what the hell we're talking about. You might disagree. That's fine. Keep boosting our engagement by telling us.
Yeah, go to the Cope section and tell us how great the M14 is again. That was fun.
But one thing you guys said is you wanted to see more guns that we actually like. I'm not doing that. Well, I'm joking. You will see some guns that we don't hate. And you'll see some more points of disagreement between me and Ivan in this season. We're starting off with something more of an interesting story of two guns, and I think it's one that's undertold and underappreciated. So why don't you bring them out?
We've got an age-old story of kissing European cousins.
Whoa! I think I've seen this anime.
For one, we have the Pig Power 550.
And I think that name, that was how many townspeople were executed with the prototypes, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
And for two, we have
the Assault Rifle 70/90.
Made by Spaghetti Power.
Yeah. Made in Italy. Patented, allegedly.
I don't know what.
Yeah.
Definitely good. Cool.
Right. So you might look at these two guns and you might be a gun person and have seen them before. What a lot of people don't realize is that these two guns were really an interesting sibling rivalry. And what we're dealing with here is actually the end of two lines of succession.
Right, like the divergent lines from a common ancestor.
Right.
So Beretta and SIG had worked together on the SIG 510, which was a gun that was designed, and Chile bought some. And so they designed that, and it was, I guess, sort of an ancestor to these. And so they then entered into a agreement where they were going to work on the design of a new gun, and that was to be the SIG 530.
And this they were going for, NATO adoption. This was to be a big deal.
Right. They were interested in, again, making it was 5.56 caliber, was sort of vying for that role.
Right, because NATO had put out a tender. I don't know.
I mean, NATO. I believe it was NATO was constantly interested in like we should all use the same gun, and all the countries are like, sure, we'll just use ours. Everybody can agree to use ours, right? The ones that we're already using, which would never work. And I mean, they were lucky to get everybody using the same caliber,
right?
So a gun was never going to happen. But they had been working on the 530, and Beretta up and pulls out of it. I've read stories that the reason for that is that the 530 just wasn't that good of a gun and had teething problems. And
this was a roller delayed gun.
More or less it was a roller delayed gun that used a similar overall structural design to what you sort of see from its spawn here. So Beretta pulls out and they ditch the roller delay mechanism entirely, and they do something really interesting. They crammed an AK inside of this. It's more AK derived than it is anything else. And so SIG, who's now been abandoned at this point, gets the genius idea of copying what Beretta just did. There is at least one step in that evolution as the SIG matures things along. But this is also sort of the second step in Beretta's evolution. This is the AR7090, which is the improved version of the original AR70. And the original AR70 got renamed the AR70-223 to tell it apart from the AR7090.
Right.
If that's not plenty confusing enough, that's good. The original AR70 had some issues with receiver strength. The receiver was capable of buckling in. They put longer rails in it in this one to reinforce it. And it also didn't take STANAGs, whereas this does take STANAGs. That's one thing SIG forgot to copy, conveniently.
Yeah, no, because how can they make $300 a magazine if it just uses static?
Of course.
But so we're talking about throwing an AK in here, and that people might not mean that much to people. So I think we should actually take a look at the components in here. And hold on, I have a nice. Wait, I'm gonna grab. You'll hear people often throwing stuff around like, "Oh, it's just an AR, it's just an AK, or whatever," and we're just guilty of doing that. But this is kind of more extreme. So to be clear, we're going to bring out just a very standard
regular AK. An exemplar of comparison.
Yeah. And let's just pull out the operating mechanism. So we have a long stroke gas piston, a rotating bolt with a funny cam track, and importantly, a front trunnion that is a separate piece which is affixed to a stamped steel receiver. In the case of an AK, they're riveted in, right? So these are the core operating mechanisms of an AKM pattern. That's what makes an AKM an AKM. Yep. A separate trunnion, rotating bolt, long stroke gas piston, like that's the recipe for
pretty important parts of.
Yeah. So, cool. Let's take a look at the SIG. That's funny pins.
It's got the world's most annoying takedown pins where they have to be pushed in on one side and then pushed through on the other. It gives you that Crum Douglas.
So here, it's still a long stroke gas piston, mind you. It's just cut in two.
And the charging handle itself is the unit that connects your piston to your carrier, which, if you ask me, it's one of the decisions of all time.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange. And I guess the thing that it really affords you here, is in comparison to the AK, is it gets your recoil spring around the piston.
Your recoil spring's in front of it instead of behind it. But we have, again, a long stroke gas piston, two-lug rotating bolt, which is incredibly similar, with internal extractor. I can show this one probably better. And importantly, we have a similarly shaped trunnion, which is, in the case of the SIG, soldered, or brazed rather, into the receiver.
I guess also of somewhat interesting note, the AK carriers have what's referred to as their tail on them,
right?
And that's that's a multi-purpose feature. It's the member that first contacts the hammer during the recoil cycle to sort of get it pushed back, but it also sort of acts as a shroud to protect the end of the stem of the carrier, which sort of serves the purpose of being an out of battery safety, but sort of only sort of.
Right.
But I mean, it is a feature that was directly borrowed over here from a standpoint of how exactly it was laid out.
God, I forgot how tight these were. So now you'll see, completely differently, we have a 2-lug rotating bolt, cam track integral to the carrier, with a long stroke gas piston that is retained by the charging handle.
And in fact, the charging handles are strikingly similar.
Right.
Now, of course, this all comes after.
Well, and again, we have a trunnion, which is, in this case, quite substantially welded to the receiver section. So it'd be fair to say that these are, the family tree is AK, and then I guess you'd argue the Beretta. That either way, they were siblings of a AK lineage that started off being
derived from a roller delayed joint project, which sort of gave the guns their external shape. As far as their, they've got a lower end receiver and an upper end receiver, and it's mounted at a tower that comes up off of the lower end receiver. So in that regard, they are very AR-15-esque in terms of their overall, an L shape. I guess if you want to call it an L-shaped lower receiver, and then a tubular track upper receiver.
Right.
How they go about that is nothing at all like the AR-15, but the receiver general structural layout, if you were to classify it, I'd say is the same.
But yeah, very interestingly, these bolts all have the same idea.
Yep. It's 3 different implementations of more or less the same idea.
Right. I think it's super fascinating.
It really is.
Of course, it's funny because you said earlier the 7090 is like the orcish implementation.
Right. Like when you compare these guns side by side, especially from like a quick visual overview, with the Beretta you have some like godlike spot welds that traditionally hold them together.
Right.
And you can pick and choose which gun it is that you find that you look at, but it's very welded together. It's very rough from a standpoint of stamped steel construction, and everything about it sort of just exudes this. I was made to be cheap,
right?
And I mean, really, it's like the AR-18, right? Like the AR-18 was to the AR-15. It was made to be a cheap, welded together, stamped together. I guess it's like a orcish rifle, and that's sort of contrasted with the SIG, which by all means are at least touted to be. The refined, elegant Swiss watch, blah, 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 the Rolex of AKs, whatever, right?
Right. There's substantial brazing, and the TIG welds that keep the rails in are very, well, I mean, most certainly done by robot, right?
Right.
Whereas this may well have been done by just an Italian.
Yes. It was done by Tony.
Yeah, Tone. But the mechanical similarity here, even in it's undeniable.
Right, there was certainly parentage from the AK itself to be found in both of these.
Right.
It's just, I guess it's just one of those cool stories where they had been working together. Beretta pulls out. Beretta does this.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, SIG is like, yeah, probably that roller delay setup's not going to. I mean, they did continue the roller delay for a little bit, but then they're like, yeah, we're going to stop doing that. We're also going to move to a gas-operated gun, and we're also going to make it a long-stroke gas piston, and it's also going to be a piston that's detachable by means of the charging handle for the disassembly of the rifle, which is just incredibly interesting, right? To see that.
It's like we split off up here, right? We split off before we've even agreed on an operating system,
right?
And we wind up taking the guns apart the same way,
right?
It's super fascinating. So, all that to say that the guns are AK derived, but
in different ways, and I mean different
and the same ways,
right?
In the decisions that were made are mostly non-functional,
right?
They made some very interesting manufacturability decisions.
Yes.
Like the shapes here are.
I think the Swiss probably actually made this simpler.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more shapes on this.
And a lot more parts, actually.
Yes.
Well, not a lot, but
They got an added firing pin retainer.
Right.
Versus this having the SIG having an AK style, the firing pin is retained in the bolt stem itself.
yeah.
The Italians did something interesting.
Yeah, they left them in with a little dugger, which...
From a standpoint of a human factors engineering, like designing around the fact that the guy using this rifle is probably going to have half the IQ of the designers, that's probably not the best. Because eventually somebody's going to put a pair of channel locks on the front of that firing pin and they're going to try to get it out.
Yeah, no, they're going to be, why is it just sitting there? Because it does. That is a failure of affordance, right? When you've taken apart your gun and it's at this stage, very little is going to make you think that shouldn't fall out.
Right.
And the way it wiggles and stuff like that is going
to me suggest it just needs to be pulled out with a pair of pliers.
Yeah, it's just stuck.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's affordance, and I guess affordance is a realization of human factors engineering, where the thing that you're interested in doing, like you can design the perfect gun, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if that perfect gun is a puzzle box to take apart and you're going to be giving it to like people who eat crayons or what have you,
Right.
Even though the gun is really technically good and it's got the best trigger and it's got the best everything, if the gun's too hard for them to understand how to take apart and they're more likely to break the gun than actually be able to maintain it, it's not that good of a gun, despite the fact that it could be perfect.
Right.
And so this is something that militaries have gone back and forth on before, where they have had the option of adopting the better, technically better, mechanically better, the more effective firearm, and will then opt for something that's simpler. You see it with police forces, right, where they wanted to stick with revolvers for so long because they were familiar or whatever, and they were afraid that the guerrillas that have the guns are going to do dumb things with them, rather than address the fact that it's easier to deal with worse equipment that you're used to than it is to get new equipment that you have to train people on.
Right.
And so there's multifaceted things that go into gun designing that isn't just I made the best gun necessarily.
Look at how stupid I am. See this.
Just get a hammer.
It's whatever. So another interesting thing here is they both have dust covers.
Yes.
Right? And so let me get these together and we'll talk about that. I think it's also worth noting that the fire controls are, they're both divergent in a way, but in terms of like broad strokes engineering are very clearly AK inspired too, is for zero location and stuff like
that. I take this put in here.
So on the Beretta, you remove the charging handle by putting a bullet tip in this little bugless on the carrier. On the SIG,
there's like this interesting latch thing that you have to lift down on that personally I hate.
Right, but that is probably from a human factors perspective.
It's more intuitive. I think it's more intuitive from a design standpoint. That seems fiddly to me. But
I mean, I would tend to agree.
I am also just conceptually a fan of the whole use a bullet tip to take the whole gun apart sort of thing.
I just use a 22 barrel liner.
If gun disassembly regimens are to have to follow a sort of a spectrum, on one end you've got stuff like your Auto 5 or Model 8 where it takes multiple different flathead screwdrivers of different sizes, and if you use the wrong size you'll bugger the screws up potentially bad enough they're never coming out again.
Right.
Like that's one extreme of like, oh, that's really not good. And I guess on the other extreme you've got toolless stuff, or stuff where like the cartridge itself is the tool or a case head is the tool, where like presumably you've always got all of the tools you need to take the gun apart, at least to a point where it's serviceable enough. Because something like an AR-15, you can even get the fire control group out with just the tip of a bullet when it comes to drifting the pins.
Right. So the other interesting area that these guns have in common is the dust cover. So, and this is another area where like people think the Swiss are these elven,
they're so their genius made the Rolex of the greatest of the best of the guns ever.
So they put a strip of rubber on.
They riveted a strip of rubber onto their gun to sort of like keep dust out or something.
And it literally it's like a weather strip on a car.
Yes.
It is just compliant.
Exactly like a weather strip on a car. You give it 5 years and a little bit of use, and there might be salt involved, and that rubber turns to crunchy powder, and then there's pictures of soldiers with like the weather strips being sad and hanging off the gun,
and like holes in the middle,
like cracked and damaged, and like there's certainly evidence that these don't hold up probably as well as they could. Right. And I've seen people refer to them as being interchangeable. And I guess as like a theoretical study of what the word replaceable means. Yeah. Sure, they're replaceable by drilling out rivets that you then have to redo.
And tiny rivets,
right? I wouldn't consider that being replaceable.
So I've installed these.
Yes.
I wouldn't want to redo it,
right?
And especially because if you walk the hole, as you inevitably will on a rivet,
you don't get to put that back unless you use the magic pixie sticks.
Yes. So. Beretta, on the other hand, went with the Magic Pixie 6 from the beginning, welded on this horrible-looking plate, but the dust cover is just a steel plug.
A spring-loaded steel plug.
Yeah. It's a spring-loaded steel plug that's replaceable by drifting out a pin.
And so if you ask me, like, hands down, that makes sense, it's smart, it's not liable to... let's say you're a soldier and you're bored, right? You're going to, chew on that or something, or poke it with a bullet tip until it breaks. Or I'm sure the Swiss military tells you not to do that, and there's probably no real documented instances of that. But from a standpoint of what's simpler or easier, maybe that ends up being a little more expensive, but probably not by much. By the time you're sinking rivets in the thing and making rubber dies. And as I understand it, right, these pieces of rubber are backed up by steel, so it's not just the bare rubber.
It's like a
riveted.
Car weather strip. Yeah,
it's not a simple manufacturing thing. Whereas here, they've got all of the tools that they needed to add that bugless onto the gun. They already had those tools.
Yep.
Whereas this, if you were to clone these rifles in any other country, right, if you were to tool up to make them, that's not even going to be the same injection molding process as your handguards or furniture. It's different, which is probably not going to be fun.
We've also both got built-in bipods.
Yep.
Now I think this is the one you gave the nod to the Beretta.
Yes,
right?
I gave the nod to the Beretta because me personally, I know everybody has their preferences about bipods, where you should be able to push into them without the legs collapsing, or pull back into them without the legs collapsing. I don't really care push or pull. I guess I've got preferences on individual guns, but in broad strokes, I don't care as long as it's something, right? And in this case, it's a pull. You can pull the bipod into you. My gripe with the SIG is the fact that you can get the bipod leg there, except then you've sort of got to go all the way forward with it, and it's all weebly wobbly.
And so and the answer to that is, well, what if you need to lower it down, and so you just do this, but then it's right. I like this bipod. I am also a fan of the Shosha, whose bipod doesn't, and I've gotten very good at using Shosha bipods. So I understand that I may be biased in a almost idiotic sense there.
Right. And I imagine, at least my understanding of what the Swiss were try to attain is like good marksmanship on the individual level. So it's like the thing that the Marines pretended to maybe used to be interested in. And so with something like this, I imagine the advantage there of that bipod that sort of got that constant amount of drag on the legs and you could get to a lower position is on an individual shot basis, you're maybe more readily able to get your gun to exactly where it needs to be and get your one shot. Whereas being able to push or pull tight into the bipod is more of a standpoint of recoil control and getting another follow-up shot. Whereas there's probably some explanation that was made along the way here with it's, well, you don't need a follow-up shot if you don't miss.
Right. They also both have optics rails that mount off of what would ostensibly be what is the trunnion.
Right.
They're really similar. One way they're both designed for rifle grenades.
Yep. And in fact, in very similar manner, so the same sort of like a split ring. I'm sure there's actually a name for whatever this design of thing is, but it's the same sort of geometry.
Interestingly, though, Beretta went with a completely removable, like faux barrel end.
Yes.
Which whatever. I mean, I'm sure there's a good maybe they get worn out or something. I've never launched native rifle grenades. But
by the 80s, there's maybe some contemplation of sound dampeners, maybe.
But I'd also like on the Beretta, we've got kind of a soldier proofing thing where you won't be able to slide a rifle grenade on until you've activated the gas cutoff. That's slick. That's good engineering. They both got the adjustable gas at the end. Operate in a similar way. They both have night sights. The 550 has a flip up front, and the Beretta, fascinatingly, just has this like big,
extremely blocky, not terribly. And it's like pistol iron sights, right? They put pistol slide iron sights. Like it's the LaRue C note. I think I know where he got it. I think he copied it from this. And of course, we were then using that on the rifle range, and I found them to be not very great. From a standpoint of
I never even bothered.
I tried using them and shot the target stand at 40 yards because that's about what they're good for. Is like a pistol sight, right? It's hard to get them exactly squared up, and the tiny sight radius with a gun that long is somewhat funky.
Another place they're different is in the sights.
Yes.
The 7090 has very much an A1 M16A1 inspired sight. It is a 2-position flip peep, and you know what? I love it. I love peep apertures, and it's don't F with it, soldier, right? Like the whole 9 yards. I think it's a clean, nice, very AR-18. It's essentially it's identical to an AR-18 when you look down the sights. You have the same exact picture minus the carry handle. Whereas the 550 has the the famous diopter. I hate it.
From a conceptual standpoint, I like what it's accomplishing. From a manufacturing standpoint, I really like how it goes about doing it, where it's it's just a drum that you poke different size holes in at different heights on the drum. Like that's kind of a cool way to pull that off. From a standpoint of using it, especially on the peep positions, I don't really mind it. Right?
Yes,
it's quite nice.
On the aperture positions,
on the open position where it's just that one, it's
just that
not my favorite.
It's confusing. Yes. It's confusing for people who are used to shooting guns like this.
It wants to draw your eyes funny directions where it's training a style about this. Training a soldier to use two different sight pictures, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And of course, I understand the advantage of an open sight is within 100 yards, you're probably more likely to be shooting at a moving target that you're going to need to want to lead or track or what have you. Whereas at 200 yards, you're probably not going to take that shot. Or if you are, it's going to be with iron sights at 200 yards, it's going to be a little bit more of a guess anyway. And so I sort of understand what they're going for from a standpoint of having open sights, but by this time, the M16A2 would come along with its rear peep that completely disappears whenever you look through it because it's so wide, and it's sort of just like put the front post roughly in the middle of this thing, and it's like a very good. It's a close range peep. You don't have to have something that's wide open to the point of being a completely different sight picture.
Yeah, and then it's also confusing because then when you use the night sights, you're lining it up along the top versus so it's a weird system, and I think that there's a lot of training that would have to go into it, which I think is a failure of that that system, because people will debate what's better for military use, is an open sight or an aperture sight, right? And it seems the answer here is to say, well, why don't we train them on both?
Put both of them. Why not?
Same gun, whatever. But yeah, so that's the sights. I think what's the next thing to talk about? The trigger.
Yeah, the trigger is certainly worth talking about. Now, this again, I'm going to give the nod to the Beretta. While I understand what they're doing with the SIG trigger, it's got a really heavy take up, and then gets to a wall, and the break at the wall is shockingly crisp, especially for ostensibly a military rifle. However, getting to that take up, the sort of the pre-travel spring weight is heavy enough and long enough that it just sort of feels out of place. Meanwhile, the Beretta has something that feels more reminiscent of an AR-15 trigger, where to me it feels normal. The SIG trigger feels unnormal.
So let's take a look at this. And I'm of the opposite of opinion. So we do have a fairly substantial. it's kind of a heavy take up. But the moment you hit this spring-loaded plunger,
it goes.
It just goes off.
Yep.
So, but that take up alone is as heavy as AR guys are pulling their trigger.
Right.
But the break is exceptionally clean. And to show you the reset, it's a little far off, but the brake is really clean.
The brake is very glass-like. Whereas to me, this just feels like military trigger.
Yep, it's just a single stage walkthrough.
Feels to me very similar to an AR-15 trigger.
The reset is far superior.
Yeah,
far superior. It's much
and at least
shorter.
If I remember correctly, the reset sort of got the the punchiness like an AR-2.
Oh yeah,
you
it
feel
slaps
it,
you.
Like it resets it to the point it needs to reset.
Yeah, the overall trigger travel on the Beretta is way shorter.
Yeah,
and you will get much faster follow-up shots on this trigger. And I think this does go with the individual marksmanship fixation.
This feels like it's a trigger that wouldn't be out of place on really any target rifle, right? Where
aside from the weight,
right? And I guess the side effect of that long heavy take up is if you wear winter gloves, like if you ever shot with the ALG 2-stage triggers, if you wear gloves, you do not feel the first stage. It's like, oh shit, I just shot.
I'm a Floridian, I don't.
he doesn't do that. Like if you wore winter gloves with triggers that have really light first stages, it's a single stage trigger. You never feel that first stage at all through your gloves. Mm-hmm. This being a country of the ice people, certainly I could understand this making a lot more sense.
Yeah, ice people, they even have the.
Yeah, they even include that on it. So that. Right. I'm sure somebody in Swiss is angrily typing in the comments, "It's on there because it's cold." Like, I don't disagree. If that is truly the justification, I don't disagree, because the first thing that hit my mind was, why on a target rifle wouldn't they make it better? Well, I think about the ALG AK triggers, which I think are extraordinarily nice, but that first stage doesn't exist when you have gloves on. You'll constantly be surprising yourself, because it's like a 3-pound total break, and if you don't feel that first stage, it's like, oh, went off, oh, went off, oh, went off, over and over again.
Whereas this, there is no question, because there is no first stage. Yes. It's just
it feels like an AR trigger. It's like, oh, heavy, oh, went. Okay.
Yeah, it's heavy gun fired. Okay, what next? But yeah, so we disagree there, and that's okay.
Yeah,
it's okay to disagree with us even. The 550, of course, has the folding stock.
Yep.
Later models of the 7090, or even contemporaneous model, it is submodel with a similarly folding stock. I don't get off on that much. Especially on a 20-inch rifle.
Right. I've talked with enough people who are like military combat service oriented that they'll say that disembarking from an armored vehicle, it makes the entire world of difference to you. I don't have a lot of experience jumping out of armored vehicles, but I'll defer to their expertise, where they say it's really, really important and nice to have.
That is one thing I will say. So one of my favorite guns, the AK-105, is my first SBR. And I was like, oh, I'm so worried to shoot this thing because, never meet your heroes or whatever. And I was driving my truck and I had it folded under my arm. And with the gun slung right here, I just got into the truck. And when I sat down, I went, I didn't think about my gun. And I was like, I get it. That's fantastic.
At least putting stuff that's in SBR category in terms of being very compact on your person, especially like if you ever everybody's LARPed around their house, right? And if you do it with a 20-inch AR and then you do it with your SBR, you're like, oh no, I get it. I get why people who are kicking down doors in Afghanistan didn't like the M16s anymore.
But the thing is, I feel like the AK-105 is the maximum length of barrel that you can have, where the folding stock really makes a difference.
Yeah, I think in that 10-inch range, because
it's 12 and a half.
Right.
Yeah. So this is a 20-inch gun.
Right.
I don't feel like you're ever going to feel not awkward getting out of a vehicle with this.
Right, because it's long enough in the front, and then of course you get down to the nitpicks where the ability to fire it with the stock folded doesn't matter, because you won't hit. I mean, yeah, sure, I'm sure you'll hit something, right? The guy in the comment shoots 500 yards with his stock off all the time. Yeah. Of course he does.
Yeah, while smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, right, the stock folding thing is just like a storage and arsenal thing, and then perhaps a disembarking or close quarters sort of a thing. But I don't know that I've talked to any military people who have shot guns with folding stocks that are saying, yeah, what you should do is kick down the door and just keep the stock folded and just use it as a Draco.
Yeah,
that's cool. That's huge if somebody's been trained to do that. That's just enormous. The dream of the Draco has finally been realized.
For sure. But let's see the mag for the 550. You can get the mag for this one too, the red one. So the 7090 uses your regular military issue standard can be Stanag mag. The 550 uses this piece of dog shit.
Yeah, I've seen people tout them as like, oh, they're so light and they're so great and they're durable, and that's cool and all, but
leave this shit outside. Leave it outside and go back to it.
Yeah.
Like I haven't personally seen this, but I am sure if this thing absorbed enough sunlight, the feed lips would just blow out.
Yeah, they feel cheap, and then they're like goofy expensive, at least here in the U.S. But and I guess it makes at least a little sense from
a military standpoint if you can just shoot them out of a mold, right?
Right. Yeah. So like if you're using your mags and stuff that's replaceable items, because like having an armor gauge mags is stupid, and having soldiers gauge mag is never going to work, right? So if you can just like have people cycle mags through constantly, that's not a bad thing. If
the mag is disposable, who cares?
Right.
And again, we're talking from a civilian standpoint. This matters.
Yeah, and it really kind of isn't great.
No, it's not. So the point goes to the 7090 on that one for sure.
And you normally the cope is like the reason you'd want to use a different mag besides Stanag is just because Stanag mags were first patterned in the AR-15. You need a mag well that's about 4 inches 4 inches long to sort of comfortably suit that mag. Now in the AR-7090 you got that, right? You got it's not quite 4 inches, but maybe 2-3 inches of mag well. So, and the catch is right below the bottom of the mag well, so it's it was getting away with just enough.
Right.
However, it's not like the SIG got significantly thinner. It is a little thinner, but it didn't save a lot of space in terms of the vertical distance of the gun.
If we didn't have to use Stanags, we wouldn't have this stupid little lip here, though.
Right.
Because the overall height of the receiver is substantial. In terms of a receiver, the height difference is massive.
Yeah. They added probably about half an inch to an inch overall.
Well, there's an inch difference in the total receiver height, I'd say.
But specifically just looking, I guess some of that difference in the lower would be made up in the upper. You got calipers there.
Oh, yeah. No, we're going to do this official. No, I want it in English, not French. All right. 3555. 3. It's only half inch.
Yeah. So it does save a little bit.
I stand erected.
Then there's always something to be said for the fact that it's been proven about 1 million different times over by whoever it is that tests it. The AK paddle mag release system works better in the cold. Works better when you have gloves on. It works better in like extreme adverse conditions, like from a standpoint of your gun has now become one with the sand. That the AR mag catch will tend to struggle. The AK mag system tends to do a little bit better. I imagine that's why SIG did what they did. That said, you absolutely can run an AR mag with a paddle release. Mm-hmm. It's just at this point it would have added quite a bit of complexity to the gun, and potentially then in that complexity, right, you've added more moving parts, and then sand becomes more your enemy. And so I understand why they do it. I just wish that like anything that uses 5.56 mags that are double stack, double feed that aren't Stanag mags, it'd be cool if they'd make them not cost $200 a magazine. It would just be kind of a polite thing for them to do.
It would be kind. So now we went and shot these, and we had 2 completely different opinions. So yes. What was your shooting experience with the Beretta?
So I liked the I liked the Beretta quite a bit. It shot pretty good. To me it felt a lot like an AR-18 or a piston AR does, where no matter what, it doesn't really want to feel smooth. Like an AR feels smooth. This is heavier than an AR, and then you go and shoot it, and it's like, like you feel the bolt bottom out, you feel the gun jump on every single shot, and I guess like a clapped out AR, you certainly feel that, but like a well tuned AR, you don't get that. And getting getting piston guns, not necessarily long stroke piston guns, they're not as susceptible to it, but short stroke piston guns commonly suffer from a thing where in order to get them 100% running reliably, you've got to overgas them more than if they were a internal piston or direct impingement or however you want to call it gun. Because of the fact that the direct impingement gun has a much tighter gas steel along the entire length of the system, because it has to, compared to a short stroke piston gun where the amount of crap that's in the piston and how quick the piston moves is going to let some gas vent by it earlier versus later, and the amount of pressure that you have here becomes important versus the amount of pressure you have through a whole pressurized system that has a much larger volume of gas that's running it, like in an AR-15 traditionally. That difference means that you need a little bit more gas in a piston system. Long stroke piston guns, at least in my experience and from everything I've learned, aren't as susceptible to that, and I imagine these are probably better gas sealing than AKs are, just from a standpoint of they don't have as much movement and slop that they're accounting for along the way. But again, it feels sharper than an AR, and this is quite a bit heavier than most ARs that I would use as a standard of comparison against them too. That said, I mean, it's still shot okay.
So I don't think this feels sharper than an AR. Certainly a little sharper than a 20-inch AR, I guess.
Yeah.
But compared to most like average ARs I've shot, this felt a little bit smoother to me, and that's all down to what you perceive as smoothness. The bolt bottoming out is its own jarring effect, right? But I feel like the way the recoiling mass travels, it just feels a little more gentle to me because it's so much heavier, right? There's less acceleration. It feels a little smoother to me, but it does have that, I'll say it again, orcish feel to it. It's certainly got the gun is operating now to it. But all that, it's not particularly notable in any way.
Right.
Like there's no thing that it does that's going to make you stop and go, whoa, like that's weird. Like that's different. We're talking about very minute changes in how the gun feels. I was very shocked at how smooth it was. I was expecting it to be horrid, right? Just from looking. I mean, look at the thing, right? You'd expect this thing to like to just like vibrate and rattle out of your hands, but it didn't. It feels very competent and it feels very solid, especially for something with like ostensibly a soup can receiver. They did a good job of strengthening it up with these full length rails. It feels super solid and it definitely inspires confidence when you fire it. Then that compared to this. Why don't you just tell us your overall shooting experience with this guy?
Well, we trigger things that we already mentioned.
Right.
I would say that to me the gun feels heavier. I guess we need to get them on the scale because that could just be purely an issue of balance. This thing having a folding stock and that thing having a more solid stock probably puts a little bit more weight towards the end of the Beretta. Mm-hmm. But to me, this felt heavier in the hands, and to me, it then felt a little bit sharper in recoil. Where I was much more acutely aware of the fact that the bolt was all the way back, and then the bolt was all the way forward, which may just be a difference of how it's sprung heavier and gassed a little harder. And there's a lot of things that could control that. That said, I mean, it's really splitting hairs. They both feel. I mean, they like the feeling of shooting them very nearly identical from a standpoint
very
of recoil
similar.
feel. Yeah. And to me, I'll again make the comparison. It feels like a short stroke piston AR or a short stroke piston AR-18 derivative. Pick your poison of the 5 million of them that there are. It feels much more to me like that than it does like a direct impingement AR.
Wait, you're saying it feels like a short stroke gun?
To me, it feels more like the short stroke guns where you're like there is a acute. The bolt has stopped at the end of the gun. That's there present. I'm conscious of that more than I am whenever I'm shooting direct impingement AR-15s because to me they feel smooth. I think smoother is the word that I want to default to using, but you feel the gun cycle. You're a lot less conscious of where the bolt is in its cycle.
You're feeling the different steps of the operating cycle.
Right.
Versus just feeling the entire operating cycle.
The AR is more like people want to tell you constant recoil is. The AR-15 is more like people want to say constant recoil is. Whereas these are more like less like that, where it's like shooting a Garand or a Mini 14, where it's like you in your mind have enough time to realize the gun's fired, the bolt's unlocking, the bolt's unlocked, the bolt's slammed home, the bolt's going forward, the bolt's the bolt's reached battery, the bolt's rotating, the bolt's closed. It's like chunk, chunk. Whereas in an AR-15, it feels like chunk, chunk.
Right. No, I think I'd agree with that. I'd say that this one, if I described it this way, there's always going to be the same energy under the curve, right?
Yeah.
The Beretta, it felt like the curve was wider.
Yeah,
right.
I'd agree with that.
This one, it felt shorter. So that's getting at the same thing you're saying.
I think it's probably gassed a little harder. Again, they're
Right.
they're probably worried about it running whenever it's a little cold, a little sad.
Right.
And then as well as ammo run in the cold will have in some cases significantly lower pressure if you get it cold enough.
Right.
And so then to counteract that whenever it's running hot, right, they have to gas it more for the cold. You put more spring in the gun to keep it from beating itself up, which all amounts to a more sharper impact,
Right.
but it might not necessarily be as painful because you've got the added spring.
But this is, don't get me wrong, this was nowhere near as bad as a short stroke gun like
No.
a 416.
No. Certainly not that bad.
So, on the spectrum where you've got here AK, here regular AR, and here, 416, I'd say the 7090 was just like maybe 2 steps to the left of regular AR, and this one was 1 step to the left.
Yeah.
So I actually liked that, and I couldn't really tell you why. It's because I think I view this more as a target rifle.
Yeah.
And so when I've shot it, it's over, right? And I'm ready to I'm ready to go for the next target. But if I was doing sustained fire, I probably would want more.
That was my perception as well. Like,
This.
especially shooting them offhand was
Right.
I was able to get myself back to where I started, and of course, especially shooting iron sights, there's like 1,000 factors that
Right.
come in there. Like aligning the sights is probably what takes you the most time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But from a standpoint of the sights coming back to align themselves better, of course, it's different styles of sights. Again.
Right.
But I found the Beretta a little bit better, easier to do that with than the SIG.
So I'll say this: I've shot both of these guns at 300 yards, and we don't have much further than that where I live, with iron sights, and they both did pretty good. I will say, it was easier for me to grab and hit the target in a shorter time.
I believe that entirely
with
the
this,
SIG. I believe that.
and it also gave me the good, happy feeling when I could hit the gong more times in a certain amount of time.
Right.
With it. So in a minute, I could hit the 300-yard gong with this more consistently. If it was at 100 yards, probably be this one.
Yep.
So it's kind of like a pick your poison thing there.
It's not quite a perfect analogy,
Right.
but like an M16A1 versus an M16A2 thing, where
Right.
with the A1 they were interested in doing a very specific thing, and then the A2 they were like, we don't really want to do that thing so much as we want to make like an accurate target rifle we can use in the military.
Yeah.
Where like a number of very deliberate changes were made to the gun, all of which I think made it probably a less well-suited combat rifle, but better suited target rifle. That said, certainly there's plenty of indication that martial prowess of a military can increase, moving away from a gun that's more combat oriented and more target oriented, because it's all what's the difference there?
Right.
I could give you a circular definition as to what the difference is, but really it just comes down to how it's employed doctrinally.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So I think there is one clear winner of the story, and it's nobody.
Right.
Because they started fighting, and what they wound up achieving was that no one used their shit.
No one used
So they wound up almost at the same place. And it's interesting to think what could have been, right? Like, because there could have been an average of these two.
Had they kept their heads stuck together, there absolutely could have been convergence, because the sum total of all of these differences, like if they had given it a 10-year development cycle,
Right.
the sum total of all of these differences would be modular junk like you've got
Right.
in AR-15s. This trigger and that mag catch be modular junk like you've got in AR-15s. There's a million different ways you can
Right.
do that. Who cares, right? Different magwell lowers, whatever. There'd be Glock mag conversions for them. Who gives a shit, right? You would have had that if these guns had been allowed to have the development cycle that
That it needed.
frankly, after having shot them both, I think they deserved. I think that they had deserved a better shot, and that their time now has like totally passed because they don't have pick rail on them. they don't have free float. Like they really wouldn't like free float handguards.
Yeah, they would hate
It'd be a
that.
kicking,
Yeah.
screaming mess. And certainly in an age of everybody's should be comfy with the fact that long stroke piston guns just tend to be harder to make accurate.
Right.
And, the Russians learned this early on. Mikhail Kalashnikov learned this early on with the Dragunov, that
Right.
there's not a great way to make a long stroke piston gun really accurate. Not that the Dragunov itself is like really accurate. I don't want to point to that and say that's the good one. That's the accurate rifle.
Right.
But
With its 4-minute clicks on the scope.
Right. Even they realized that's the direction it sort of needs to go in. So I think for like late Cold War rifles, I think these are really, really cool. I wish they cost as little as AR-15, M16E2 setups do, because that's that to put you guys in a frame of reference. These are contemporaneous with the M16A2.
Right. That's why they both came with burst options.
Right. Given the choice between the three of them, I don't know that you could go really wrong with any of them. I think they're all competent. They all shoot nice. Between the three of them, certainly if you gave me the choice between like if the 416 didn't have pick rails, you're limited to optics only, and you gave me the 416 or the A2 or one of these two, it's not going to be the 416.
Right.
It's going to be one of the other three.
Yeah. So let's do this. Let's do a little bit of revisionist history. So let's put these and the M16 here. Why don't you grab my regular M16? My regular, yeah. Right, we have here a standard run-of-the-mill M16. So between these guns, let's be the NATO committee, and let's pick the features.
Pick the features
that we
we
like.
Want. So that way they'll be ignored.
Yeah, exactly. So first off, let's go with magazine. I don't think we're going to have a debate here.
It kind of has to be Stanag.
If you put yourself in that position, though, if Stanag wasn't already done and said and over with, and it wasn't already like the super standard,
if you could set the Stanag,
you know what I'd say?
Galil mags. No, I wouldn't.
No, I'd say do this with metal.
Yeah,
that's what I'd say. I think, except rock and lock.
Because that's the problem is that they're this is something that I guess you get to tease out with these sort of conversations. Is there is not a perfect magazine retention locking design. There isn't. I'm not saying that there couldn't be, but there isn't one that's found, at least not that I'm aware of yet, because the straight end system here has its faults. The rock and lock has its, because the rock and lock's slower. The rock and lock's harder to do in the dark. The rock and lock requires you to have space in front of your gun. So if you've got a foregrip up there, if you've got accessories out there, if you've got whatever else out there, it's going to cause interference problems. Meanwhile, the straight end mag of the AR. Have you ever done mag changes on an AR when you're trying to stay low prone?
Yeah.
It fucking sucks, and that's why the 20 round mag on the AR had originally existed was you could release the mag and get it out of the gun, and it's going to be the same height as a pistol grip.
So I'd say we answer that with the Stanag. Which guns trigger?
If we are stuck locked in 1980 late. Oh man. It's not the M16A2s because it's got that the awful burst mechanism,
which is based off of a gun that I own, which I love.
I think for a combat rifle, I'm going to give it to the Beretta. But if NATO is like announced that they want a doctrine where we stop wasting so many bullets to shoot somebody, I think the SIG wins it.
I like the way you put that. I do like the way you put that. I think because we're stuck with the A2, right? And it's just a nightmare.
Yes.
It's got to be like you said, because if the question is it volume of fire or not? If it's volume of fire, you need it as dipshit simple to operate.
If you're going to have LMGs like one every 5 or better would be great. I mean, even if it's like 1 in every 10 guys, if there's going to be an LMG in every unit, every small subdivision gets a machine gun.
This one,
I think that's the way to go.
Yeah. Which is anyway. So far we've got Stanag mag, the 550 trigger. Which sights? This one's easy for me.
I think the A2 sights. The A2 sights, not that one.
Yeah, not that one.
I think the A2 sights are really good. I like the wide peep that basically disappears for your if you need to lead a target, works great for it. Inside of 100 yards, works fantastic. Move to the small peep, it still works at 100 yards fine, and then beyond that, it works good.
I'm gonna fight you on this.
Really?
The AR-18 sights.
Interesting.
I like the way they were done here. They're simple. You've got your two nominal ranges built in.
If you're concerned about troops being funny
and chewing on them,
then that's certainly good. From a standpoint of if you're going to assume your troops are beyond draftee stage, in that they kind of know what they're doing, they have if they're soldier IQ, if soldier IQ is a thing, and 100 is they're just competent and they know what they're doing, and you don't have to explain it to them over and over again. if they're at 100 or better, A2 sights are great because especially when it comes to adjustability in iron sights, I think the A2 is the easiest and best it's ever been pulled off. Where it's too easy to use knobs that have indications,
Right.
Indications dialing them in that make sense. I don't think it's ever been done quite that well in iron sights, and of course that came right at the end of we don't want them in iron sights anymore.
Yeah.
I think they have to go away.
It's very similar to the Garand aside from the.
Right. I mean, and I think that's probably where they got it from.
So yeah, I would say that. You say A2. I think both are fair. What about the stock? Basically, foldy or no?
If you've got the operating system that allows for it, I don't like even with as much or little, right? You can make up your mind of whether or not that wiggle offends you. It doesn't offend me enough that
it's
I
almost
wouldn't want
imperceptible in the 550.
I don't mind having the folding stock if the action allows for it. That said, if the action doesn't, I'm not. If it's up to me, I'm not compromising the action of the gun to make it more portable for storage. If you're going to be fighting indoors, you just have a shorter gun.
Okay, so then the hard question: which action?
And for me, I'm a big, massive stoner simp. Stoner simp for life. I think I'm going to go with the. I think I'm going to go with the AR's action. This AR, not we've got lots of ARs here. I think I'm going to go with the direct impingement stoner internal piston system.
I want this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't give you a real reason why, aside from that I think it's for men. Like I think long stroke is and I know that's stupid, but it's just how I feel.
I'm old enough to remember where long stroke piston guns had the spring behind the bolt.
Yeah, no, I do love the idea of it being up front.
I think that's an improvement. Personally, I think that's an improvement on the AK action.
Yeah, I agree. I actually agree.
I think that if Russia wasn't if Russia wasn't hyper fixated on making the same gun that they adopted in the 40s in the 1980 years ago, if they weren't obsessed with that being the gun that they continued to make and use, because we're saving money on tooling, guys, by making a 90,000-year-old gun.
Right.
If they weren't hyper fixated on that, they totally could have moved the recoil spring up above the barrel, because what that really gives you is you can have a receiver that you can put a pick rail on that doesn't suck. It's not like a top cover.
Both of these could easily have that.
Yes, I mean you could weld pick rails on these and they would be good.
Yeah,
and wouldn't have to worry that much about it.
All right, so I see that we were unable to
come to an agreement. So we're all going to back out and adopt the rifle.
Yeah. Oh wait, I mean this one. That's funny. Yeah, that's how it went.
Exactly like that.
But yeah, no, I think these are great. I think these are underappreciated. I think these are overappreciated.
The 550s are like massively romantic. I mean, at least the circles I've run in, they're massively romanticized, and people will make any excuse to like, what do these cost? Like, at one point in time, they cost like $2,500. Now they're like, ha ha hee. I don't know that. Like on a level playing field, again, I'm trying to get better at divorcing myself from how a gun's value is without money factored in. When you factor money in, no fucking way. It's just not.
Yeah.
If they cost maybe $800, I think it shoots like a nice AR. So like it shoots better than like a crummy gassed regular.
I think it shoots like a nice AK, which I think makes it worth a little more than a nice AR. But and this is the hardest thing, right? Because it is impossible for me and Ivan to divorce our conceptions of a gun from how much it costs.
Right. Like, I would pay $1,000 for that and wouldn't feel like a sucker. I'm not paying $2,000 for that. I feel like a sucker. I know what you paid for that. Yeah. I'm not saying you're a sucker, but
I am retarded. But here's the thing: is like, this is a really good gun. Yeah. Don't fucking buy one. Yeah, like I think that's the
if you can get a good deal. I mean, so how about this?
You're not getting like this. It's 1,000% not worth it.
I'm going to put it to you like this: that it's different than the G36, and it's not just because I actually managed to come out liking this one.
Right.
I think if you've got a deal on this, and this is your dream gun, go for it. I don't think you'll be disappointed. As far as when you go shoot the gun, I don't think you'll be disappointed.
No.
Unless you think that this needs to shoot 3 times better than a good AR, because it won't. It never will.
Yeah.
But if you're like, I want a gun that shoots good, and it's got to be this one because I fell in love with it because of this video game's movie adaptation or whatever,
I wanted these colors to go Counter-Strike.
I don't think you'll be sad. Whereas with something like the G36, oh boy,
You're just an idiot.
you're going to be in that comment
Yeah.
section hammering on the keyboard about how great your gun is, and it's totally not that bad, and it's actually really good. And the flappy Bringle charging handle only happens on some of them that were made before this date, and then they change it and they don't mount, and they're all really good.
They're all really good. So here's what I'll say about the 550. Objectively, good gun.
Yeah.
If you are looking for a competent rifle for objective, reasonable shooting purposes, and you are just looking at all guns, and you factor in price, this is objectively a miserable choice.
It's not very good.
It's awful. This is a bad choice to make.
If for some reason
If you're not a gun collector or you don't have like some
Right.
sort of emotional investment in it, like basically if you're too young to have played Counter-Strike 1.6, you have no reason to buy this gun. I will tell you, I would not own this if it weren't for Counter-Strike. Like, I would have had to borrow one. What were you saying?
Well, I was just thinking from a standpoint of at least obtaining them in the U.S. They are cheaper in the land of the people who don't fight wars, and
Because they gave it to you.
they even have, I understand, pick rail versions of them that are like good and stuff that we can't get here. So certainly the Europors who are typing, they're like, oh, we can get those and they don't cost anything and it's really great. And
The government gives them to us.
yeah, sure. All I have to do is sign over my entire life and prove them not insane, and they can buy my house anytime. Yeah, okay, we get it.
Yeah,
sure,
whatever.
sure.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. I'm so jealous of that. Not.
Yeah.
But so certainly there are.
And they only pay $18 a liter for
$18 per kiloliter petrol.
petrol in your little. Oh, then they pay the gas guzzler tax on anything over 1.3 liters.
Oh, that's making triple-digit horsepower. Yikes!
Yeah.
You fucking white supremacist.
But yeah, so that's all that. So that's the 550. This is a harder question. So these are weird because the parts kits, like you can't get a 7090 like just regular. You have to build it.
I think Springfield did import some. I could be wrong.
But
on
that's
that,
like
but right, it's like they're unobtainable.
Yeah, it's like retarded.
Right.
So you have to build it. The parts kits for a time were like $400.
Yeah. For
right.
a while, the parts kits weren't bad because the receivers didn't exist.
There was no receivers.
Nobody was making them because when it comes to like receiver proprietarity, that's a really, really proprietary receiver.
It's absurdly proprietary, and like in putting it together requires more than a little knowledge of tigging.
Right. People want to make AK builds out to be the worst thing ever, and I'm not saying that they're like fun or easier and enjoyable. Like if you're the kind of person who's like put 20 AKs together and like, oh boy, I can't wait to do another. You're weird.
Yeah.
You're different than me anyway. Like,
I love AKs. I build AKs. You won't hear me saying I love building AKs.
Right. Like a couple a year is okay. Like there's certain parts of like building the MP5s and stuff that I enjoy. There's a hard limit to that though.
I actually like taking the MP5s.
Yeah. Something like that is just
this.
If you enjoy that, then that's crazy. I want to see what color the vise that you enjoy smashing your nuts in is.
Yeah. If I like not having a Bridgeport and a lathe would have made this unbelievable.
Unfun.
Instead, it was just annoying.
Yeah.
Right. So. But then it's hard to give that impression of this gun now because it's kind of a weird proposition. You can find them on the secondary market,
right?
Whatever. I'd say that given the rarity and all that stuff, you'd put a reasonable price on this at $1,000, and I agree because they're still making them,
right?
Right. This I'd say, If I saw this and I spent $1,500,
I was about to say $1,500 is the number that popped right to my mind. But if it's got, the top sights are cool.
I thought we were supposed to not be agreeing this one, but no, I'd say if you found it for $1,500, there's no way you'd feel like a loser.
Yeah, it's different, right? Because I know some people are obsessed with having the gun that no one knows about. And I get some of a kick out of that. I think at the end of the day, anybody who's a big gun geek likes having the gun that their gun geek friends are like, what the fuck? Yeah.
But then the difference is, so here's the two genders, right? There's the people who are like, what is that? Is that a... And, people will inevitably say, is that something like, is that an AK-74? And they're the ones that go, no, it's an AR-70. It's Italy did that. And it's spaghetti. And then there's the cool guys that just go, yeah. That's what I always said. Yeah. Like I had a Moss 49 I was shooting. He was like, is that an M14? yeah. And the guy goes, wait, no, it's not.
No, it's
I go,
not.
what do you mean? Yes, it is. But
I mean,
yeah, so
being that guy to rub it in people's faces is awful.
yeah,
admittedly.
yeah, terrible.
Like having a cool gun where it's like, have you ever seen one of these? Like, holy shit, I didn't know they made them. Like if the autism of choice that you choose to have is high powers, oh my god, you will never stop learning about this new high power because like what 70 countries on Earth have used them.
Yeah.
Everything under the sun has been tried with high powers. There's been countries that have knocked them off and only made a couple of them. It's such a bizarre world, and I get for the same reason that I get a kick out of that. I think the AR7090 would be worth more monetarily to me than the SIG because the SIG is immediately identifiable. People are going to think like, what the hell did he do to a SIG with that?
Yeah. That's funny. Like, yeah, no, they're going to say, what's under that? I've gotten that a lot of times where it's like, there was a gun I recently posted and somebody said, is there a Mac 10 hiding under there? I don't remember. It was on Twitter. But yeah, and the one last thing. We didn't say which furniture you'd go with between the A2 and these guys.
That gun's bipod, this gun's furniture.
I say no bipod and this furniture. Because this furniture is a little fragile.
Yeah.
Bipods are stupid.
From an ergonomic standpoint, I like the way that furniture feels. I hate the way that bipod works, and I hate how that bipod feels on that furniture. But like, if they could find a way to put that bipod under this furniture or something that's physically impossible, that'd be great.
I like the big grabblers in this.
Yeah.
I like
I like that this is, I like that the SIG is slim, and
it is. Slim.
If this thing had a sight rail on it and you're to C-clamp it, dude, that gets me so good. That feels so right.
Yeah.
Like it feels like the oval A2 handguards, which for me are my favorite AR handguards.
All right. So yeah, no, I think that's more or less all there is to say about these guns. We'll let the shooting video play out now with its audio, as you've just been seeing it over the video up to this point. And
if you have something insane to say in the cope section, go right ahead. But go ahead and tell us how you paid $20,000 for your SIG and you do it again just to prove us wrong.
Yeah, and if you want to just send money on fire and you want to waste it, I have a Patreon you can join. And
that's true.
I can waste it better than you, I bet.
The competition.
Yeah.
In order.
Yeah. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. We will see you on the next episode.
I want to try it with the night sights too. I don't think the night sights are quite on. Smoke the target there. That's a good shot. I mean, I was aiming for that. Yeah, the night sights are probably a lot more close quarters intended, but
yep.
The regular sights are really, really nice.
My turn.
It can't eject live rounds. The ejector's too far forward.
That's my fault. I think it's really smooth.
It's pretty smooth. Let me try a couple more because I want to consider the weight of the thing because it's heavy.
Yeah.
Like for a 5.56, this is like 8 pounds maybe. I can't C-clamp it. No. That's pretty sharp for an 8-pound 5.56. Kind of.
Hold on, let me try it. We'll try it off the bipod.
Yeah, try it off the bipod.
You don't know how to pull out a spaghetti pod?
Nope. Oh, there we go. Just pull it. Okay.
And they just get one little. Leave the bipod out. Okay.
You know what it feels like to me? Is that HK33? Like it feels a lot like it to me.
I know why you know what that feels like.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. Somehow I doubt that this is in the frame of that.
What the hell is even that?
I don't hate it.
Nice.
You want? Very nice.
Now, the thing that I'm going to say about it, like it's got it, you know, it's smooth, but I think that if this thing weighed 6 pounds like an AR, it would be awful. Like if that thing lost 2 pounds, because you really feel that bolt come back, right? It's a fucking it's an AR-18, right?
Right.
Is it an AR-18 bolt for really?
No, it's an AK bolt.
Right. Like love this bipod so much. It's so good.
Okay, switch. I'm gonna do the top right diamond.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.